Good evening and welcome to VI Voices. I'm Emile Henderson III along with Clint Ferris and Natalie Nelson, Tang. We are here for another episode of VI Voices, and tonight we have a very special guest. Tonight we have Stacey Plaskett, who is a candidate for the delegate to Congress this year, and she'll be running against, of course, in the Democratic primary against our current delegate, Donna Christensen. So it should be an interesting conversation.
Very interesting.
And so we, as you know, we always start out with hot topics, and tonight that will be no different. And our first hot topic, of course, is we talked about this yesterday when we discussed the issue of the role that we should play in the national election. How do we get people out to vote in the national election?
Hey, I think we need to motivate them. I've loved the campaigns that have come out, that came out of Hollywood for the past 10 years. Vote or die, rock the vote. It's rather imperative that our people understand that voting is a matter of life or death. They may not think of it in such broad terms, but it is. Because if you do not exercise that right, it's going to impact your life in all facets. And I think the young people, the older people, everyone need to get out and vote. I hope they do vote Democrat, but vote nonetheless.
Right.
The importance is your vote. Each vote counts. It's really, really important, especially our young people. From the time you turn 18, one of the first things you need to do is go in and register to vote, because it's really, really important. And I think that the local elections actually is going to somewhat mirror or spill off with the federal elections as it relates to Obama. And I think that those of us who wants him to return to office should do our part by voting here locally. So it's really, really important. And maybe what we do need to do is motivate the young people. Because I know, for example, when Obama first ran, the amount of young people that came out and vote was phenomenal.
And it was the use of how he campaiged.
Exactly.
Actually.
I know. Social media.
Social media to
Oh, yeah.
I think that this election, looking at who the opponents are, meaning Mitt Romney and Congressman Ryan, and the fact that there is such a disdain for our president now in this country, it is so important that all of us go out and vote. And for us who have family that live in the states that can vote, to encourage them and all our friends to go out and please go out and vote. You know, they're trying to take away our health care, trying to take away Social Security, trying to take away our government assistance programs. And so this is a serious issue.
Correct. And it's more than just, and you talk about health care, but it's also about the working men and women in America.
Definitely.
They're trying to bust up the unions. They're really going that far. And look at what took place last year and what took place earlier this year. And it's rather important that we go out and we vote. And I think I get my kids involved from early. I think we need to get our kids involved from early. Go out and teach them how to campaign, teach them to be involved in the process. Because if you start them out from early, they're going to become enthralled by the process. They're going to become
and less apathetic.
Yes, less apathetic. They are participants of the process.
I know people feel so disdain right now. They're discouraged. You know, we are in an economic crisis locally, and you know, on the mainland too, they have issues. And I think that people feel like, you know, my vote doesn't make a difference. It's just a waste of time. But really and truly, you're dead wrong. Your vote does make a difference.
Absolutely.
Everybody got to go out there and vote. So please.
Now the other night I was watching television, and they were showing these legislatures or parliaments, as they call them in other countries. And their legislators were in there and they were throwing shoes and they were fighting and they were doing all these other things. And
it makes our legislature
look mild,
look civil.
Well, so I wanted to talk about decorum in your legislature or your parliament. You know, because just the other day there was a session, the Government Operations Committee, and there was just some banter going back and forth between people who were testifying or in the well and certain senators. What do you think about decorum? What's the proper decorum in the legislature?
The proper decorum is that you don't make anything personal. You refer to everyone either in the third person or use sir, ma'am, or the gentleman or the lady from. To me, that's acceptable.
And they do that, but I think to me, it's treat others the way you want to be treated.
Right.
You know, the tone of voice, the addressing, even if you use sir and ma'am, but it's the tone of voice that you use that really sets the
Well,
tone.
I think we became too rah-rah.
No.
We got too much rah-rah going on in the legislature.
But is
and
it to please our constituents?
I think so.
I think it's to put on a show.
Yeah, but the irony is, last legislature, they censure a senator. And most of those senators are still there in this present legislature. And they're allowing one particular senator to run amok.
Yeah.
And she's intimidating, bullying people. I mean, what's going on with our and they're saying that these are role models and they're trying to mentor our children.
But maybe we need to rub off on them the against the bullying campaign.
I think so.
Because if it's not allowed
In
for
the
our
legislature.
children in schools, it cannot be allowed for our
I
adults
completely
who
agree.
set the tone and are supposed to be the role
I
models.
completely agree. But
Now, I will turn off my TV when that starts because I refuse to have that kind of environment in my home. So I totally, turn it off.
Correct.
And then I think a lot of other households in the Virgin Islands do the same thing.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, I know that we might be hearing some stuff coming up, I would presume, on not some of those senators who don't have decorum, as to challenges to their ability to be there.
You know why that's significant? I mean, think about it. When you have these testifiers coming in, why do you think some of them refuse to come? Simply because they do not want to be subjected to that type of treatment.
Yeah.
I would not show up.
But see, the problem is that we have this thing that's called civil immunity for your work
Yes.
when you're in the Senate.
Right.
And so they believe that they can say and do whatever they want on the
Exactly.
Senate floor as long as they say it on the Senate floor because you can't really file claims against them. And you're correct. That's why people, when they go to the legislature, they don't, in fact, they don't even want to go
Exactly.
to the legislature because of how they are treated.
I hope it goes both ways because they're not just holding those barbs for senators. They're volleying them outside
Yeah.
to testifiers and people
Yeah.
in the gallery.
Yeah.
I mean, that behavior just doesn't cut it.
Yeah. Now, a big issue has been this topic about the lawsuit filed by Mr. Lawrence Olive in regards to the governor using public funds on his private home. I know we have been discussing this at least for the last 2 or 3 years now. The Superior Court Judge Donahue has just dismissed that lawsuit. And it's been up in arms now because everybody's so upset that the judge dismissed the lawsuit. But I'm not quite sure that we fully understand
the basis
of the dismissal of that lawsuit. And it appears to me when I read it that it seems to be correct, meaning the decision. Not that we are believing that it's okay for any kind of public corruption on any level or any form. But when you file complaints, there are certain kinds of requirements you have to establish and satisfy. And it appears to me that that really wasn't done.
So the complaint
in this
itself
case.
was deficient.
So the complaint itself was deficient. But what is good to note is that the dismissal, though with prejudice because of the way the complaint was filed, the complaint itself doesn't go to the merits of the claim. So the judge isn't saying that what was happening was correct. What the judge is saying is that your complaint as filed does not meet the requisite standard or prima facie standard to make it past a motion to dismiss. So there was nothing on the merits. So somebody else can file the lawsuit, file it better, and can go ahead and go forward.
Because under those circumstances, it was just dismissed based on procedurally. It did not go to the merits of the substantive nature of the case, whether or not there was right or wrong. That was never addressed. But when it's dismissed with prejudice, it cannot be refiled again.
Yeah. So somebody else can do it.
Somebody else can file it, but that particular lawsuit is dead.
Correct. Now, what I find interesting is the fact that we have 5 senators who have, on their own volition, opted not to seek re-election. Has that ever happened in history? Has that ever happened before?
That blew me out the water.
And 4 of them on St. Thomas.
But think about it, and the perks is sweet. Life in the legislature, $85,000, a fat budget. You think you're a god.
All expenses paid.
What?
Yeah.
So there's something.
Who does that?
I don't know, but there's something more going on here with our legislation.
I mean, this is the first time that I can remember that so many incumbents are voluntarily coming forth and not.
And 4 from St. Thomas. That's the part that has.
And you know what? It may not be all. There may be more to come.
Correct, but you think about the 4 from St. Thomas. You think about those 4 that have their seats locked in: White, Dow, Hill, and Williams. Those 4. I mean, so you have to really wonder what's taking place. Is there more to come they're more behind. Behind of this.
Well, the good part of it, I always look on the bright side of everything. That opens the door for new blood.
Right.
We want some new, right in St. Croix and St. Thomas, St. John. I think everybody wants just some changes to see if somehow we can move forward in a different direction.
Well, there may be some new blood, whether the incumbents decide to leave or not. But we're going to follow up this discussion. We're going to keep track on this as we go on some more. But tonight we have Attorney Stacey Plaskett with us, and when we be back, she'll be right over there sitting on the hot seat. We'll be back in a moment. And we are back, and with us we have Stacey Plaskett.
Good evening.
Good evening, and welcome to VI Voices.
Evening. Thank you all. Good evening.
It is a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And you are going to be running for delegate to Congress.
That's correct. I filed my nominating papers today.
Excellent. So you're going to actually be in a primary with Delegate Christensen.
That's correct.
Okay. Alrighty. And so we wanted you on the show because we want to discuss, who you are, what your intentions are. Hopefully, if you were to succeed through the primary and eventually to the general election, and what do you think you're going to bring for the people of the Virgin Islands if you in fact were to be successful?
Great. So a little bit, I guess I'd give you a little bit about my background. Both of my parents are from St. Croix, and I came home 7 years ago after living for many years in New York as well as Washington, D.C., where I was an attorney. And I worked on the Hill. My first job out of college was with Delegate Ron DeLugo. I begged him for a job until he hired me, harassed the man. And so that was my first job. I worked with lobbying groups. After law school, I was in New York. I was a prosecutor. In the Bronx DA's office, I was a narcotics prosecutor. And then I came back to Washington and I worked on the Hill. And I was on the House Ethics Committee as counsel there. And then I went to the Justice Department after September 11th, and I worked with the Deputy Attorney General, and I was one of the senior counsels on his staff. I worked on the tobacco litigation. I worked on setting the parameters for the September 11th Victims' Compensation Fund. And I also worked on increasing diversity among the lawyers of the Justice Department. And then I also worked on our budget to Congress. So we prepared a $28 billion budget every year that went to Congress that we had to lobby and discuss with members of Congress. And I came home 7 years ago. So initially I was in private practice, and then I was working at the Economic Development Authority. And several months ago I resigned from my position there, and I've been campaigning. But aside from that, and more importantly, I'm a wife, a daughter, and I'm also a mother of 5 children. So that, I think, informs a lot of what I do.
You're juggling and balancing and doing a lot of things. So that's a good thing.
And then also my husband and I, when I came home, you have to be a part of your community. Definitely. So we both sit on a lot of boards, are involved in a lot of nonprofits. We work with Landmark Society, with WIM. I'm on Lutheran Social Services Board. We're also on the Boys and Girls Club. We are also involved in our church. I sit on the church council of the Lutheran Church in Christiansted. So we're just really involved in the community and what's going on.
Well, I got some questions for you as a wife and mother too. Taking on the position, were you to succeed of delegate to Congress and representing the Virgin Islands, and you're going to go back and forth between the Virgin Islands, on the Hill, and other places as well. How are you going to handle that balancing act in terms of your priorities, and
the same way a man would who had the position that had children. And I find it so interesting that usually people ask me as a woman a question like that, but that's not usually a question that's posed to a man that's married with kids. So before I decided to do this, my husband and I sat down. We sat down with our children. I have 3 sons that are in college, so we discussed it with them, with our parents, because it takes a village to raise a child. And said, look, this is something that I'm thinking about doing, that I'm really committed to doing. How do you feel about it? Because if I don't have your support, it's not going to happen. And everyone was definitely like, go ahead. But my husband has said, he and the kids have said they ain't going to the States. They are not trying to live in winters in D.C., so I will be the one commuting back and forth.
Right.
Right.
Well, you have, I presume, an economic plan or an economic agenda. And one of the things that the people of the Virgin Islands are looking for is how can we, as a territory, get as much money as we can for the people of the Virgin Islands. So, you know, we've had issues with our rum cover over issues and the stability of that program in light of Diageo. We've had the issues with our roads. We're driving on deplorable roads, but our roads are still technically federal roads.
Right, many of them
funding for them.
Correct.
How do we get around that? Our education dollars, all these things to get back to our community so that we're able to do the things that we need to do.
Right.
What will be your plan on getting that happen?
One of the things, I think that there are a bunch of different things and creative solutions that can be done. But one of the first things I looked at in determining whether or not we were getting the most that we could have for the office that it's there is to be informed by what some of the other territories have done. And I think that there are examples of ways that we could be much more creative in receiving funds directly here to the territory that we haven't done thus far. One of the simplest things I think is that, as we all know, there's a federal poverty level that's set. And this is a national rate that's determined, and you say, okay, this is what the national federal poverty level is, and I believe at this point it's like $22,000 for a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children. And anything below that is considered federal poverty, and that determines things like the WIC program, school lunches, Section 8. But there are other jurisdictions that have gone to the federal government and said, you know what, our cost of living is so high, our level should be higher. And we by far have the highest cost of living. We have a smaller amount of people, and therefore our federal poverty level should be even higher than that. And that would allow more federal dollars to come in that would free up money out of our general fund to allow then us to utilize that money in other places.
Well, have there been other jurisdictions that have been able or been granted a higher poverty level?
Yes, so New York was granted one, areas of New York, Hawaii as well, and then there are other smaller areas, of course, who have been able to do that because of the immense cost of living in those areas. Well, you know, and ours is higher than theirs.
To follow up on that, though, because I see that you do have a background, having been on the Hill, working in various capacities, and then you want to go, you know, as a delegate. And as you know, the incumbent has been there, what, about
16 years.
You know, so she has established herself there. She has seniority. She has ranks in certain committees and all of that. So
that's an interesting argument that's being made, but I think it's you know, not entirely giving the true picture, because seniority in the House does not count for that much. What really counts is leadership skills. And you'll see that since 1974, the House did away with rules that said because of your seniority, then you're automatically given particular deference in terms of committee assignments and ranking. But
our Congresswoman was here last night, if I recall correctly.
And she did say she has seniority.
She did say that
and there are things that come with seniority, and seniority gives you, for the most part, you're guaranteed a larger office space. But it doesn't necessarily mean that what committees you are on will determine your ranking, because there are members of the House who have not been there very long, particularly even members in the Black Caucus. In the last several terms, there are young members of the Black Caucus who have really exerted enormous amounts of leadership and not just, I wouldn't say aggressiveness, but just being very forward-leaning, forward-thinking, that have been given enormous amount of rank. Donna Edwards, who is an attorney from Maryland, and then there are several other members of the Black Caucus who came in 2008, one even in 2010, who are now minority whips for the Democratic Party in the House right now because of what they have exerted in terms of leadership. Our delegate does not have any rank on the committee that she is in at this point. She has removed herself from those committees that are directly related to the Virgin Islands. She is the only delegate that does not sit on the Natural Resources and Interior Committee, which has direct jurisdiction over us. She has moved into Energy and Commerce, which is considered an exclusive committee.
But wouldn't that committee, though, be, while it's exclusive, but quite powerful, so that your trade-off, I'm trying to figure it out, why one would do that, that your trade-off, while you may not be in a committee where you may have direct control over us, going over to the NCON committee with so much more power will kind of give you a little bit more leverage.
Well, interestingly, for the U.S. Virgin Islands and all the other territories, the Energy and Commerce Committee that directly is related to us is the subcommittee on energy and power in the Natural Resources Committee. So the Energy and Commerce Committee, while it's considered an exclusive and very powerful committee, is very powerful because it gives those members of Congress access to large businesses, to large corporations, to large PACs, to large campaign contributions.
But Ms. Plaskett, politics is not a spectator sport, and it's the longer you do it, the better you become at it.
For the most part, in most cases.
Yes, and think about that. The influence doesn't just stay within the House of Representatives.
Sure.
You're going to have to deal with other forces that impact a delegates, the House of Representatives, like companies, the White House, all of those people who have been there. How do you say someone with your, I don't want to say
so on my lack of seniority.
Let's say lack of seniority would come in and engage those people to bring back returns for the Virgin Islands.
Well, one of the things that I think that we have not done a good job of in our Office of Delegate to Congress is we have not been very broad in the amount of people that we've spoken to. If you look, you just go onto the web and look at the amount of money that the U.S. Virgin Islands spends on lobbying. The government of the Virgin Islands itself spends an enormous amount of money in terms of lobbyists for our rum cover over, for the ARA funds, and those ARA funds did not, like other jurisdictions, go to separate divisions of our government. They went only to the bulk of it, the vast majority of it went to our governor's office, because it was the governor and his lobbyists who were the ones that worked on ARA funding. And that's because we have not really spoken to a broad group of people in Washington. We have the delegate's office. The delegate has just talked primarily with the Black Caucus. That is where most of her allegiance lies. And I believe that, while membership in the Black Caucus has a purpose, all members who are of African American descent or are part of the African diaspora are part of the Black Caucus, that it's a fallacy when you do not have a vote to only speak with those individuals. Because let me give you an example.
But before you do that, I guess what I wanted to get, because I don't think I heard it, what exactly would be your plans for bringing the money back to the territory?
And that's what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is that you must be able to speak with a broad group of people in Washington. You can't just relegate yourself to one group of individuals. That's 43 members out of 435 members. And I think the proof is in the fact that when she has bills in front of Congress, she does not have co-sponsors of those bills. She does not have sufficient co-sponsors of her bills to move them forward. And that is the one thing that gets bills moved along in Washington, is co-sponsorship. And how do you get co-sponsors? You act as a lobbyist. You act as someone who not necessarily is just a lawmaker, but an individual who is willing to speak with whomever is willing to speak with us. Case in point, the delegate from DC, Eleanor Holmes Norton, a professor from Georgetown University Law School, has been on the Hill for some time. She does not have a vote, and yet she is considered in the top 5% of all lawmakers. We are right now at the bottom of all lawmakers in Washington. Why? Because she'll talk to whomever is willing to help her get funding back to her people.
But she also has the capital city behind her.
And that's not true.
Let me put it this way, to the extent, and I think what we don't, not to take anything away from her, because I do know her, not personally, but I know of her, and she is extremely talented at what she does. And I think whether she was there or in the Northern Mariana Islands, she'd probably be doing exactly the same thing that she's doing. But for whatever reason, we at least should recognize that as a territory of the Virgin Islands, we're like, oh, over here, to them. Right. I honestly believe that there's some Congress people that have no idea where the U.S. Virgin Islands is located, much less.
It's interesting that you mentioned Northern Marianas, because they as well, they have a delegate to Congress who's on his third term, and he as well has a very high lawmaking position as well, in terms of the amount of legislation that he's been able to get passed in the short period of time that he's there, from Northern Marianas, which is even further away from Washington than we are. Why? Because he talks and caucuses with whomever is willing to help his people. Another bill that Northern Marianas has that mirrors one that DC did. In 2002, the delegate from DC worked with a congressman from Virginia, a Republican, to say that any DC student who lives as a resident of DC and graduates from a high school The federal government will subsidize their tuition so that they pay in-state tuition in any public university. Northern Marianas now has the same bill up. They have a lot of co-sponsors and they're gaining traction on it.
But wouldn't that hurt?
We have not done that.
If that were to happen, wouldn't that hurt our University of the Virgin Islands if we were to have a plan where we would subsidize the portion, have them?
No, the federal government would subsidize. The federal government subsidizes it, and it would give our students choices, because we have students who are looking to other. How would it affect it? It would still be a viable choice because it's a great university. So does that mean that students wouldn't want to go there because they know that they can't pay tuition? I think we need to give people choices in terms of university, and that's a way to do that.
But I think what Attorney Henderson is hinting at is that promoting a legislation like this then affects us internally, because then you have the competitors now are not outside. The competitors now come within our shows, where we have Howard. Let's talk about Florida State, Indiana State, University of North Carolina, and those universities now become attractive because their tuition is more accessible.
You don't want your students to have choices in the terms of universities?
No, it's not about choices.
Yeah, I don't think it's about choices.
It's about breaking down what's within our shows.
No, I don't think that breaks us down. I think that causes us to be better and to become more attractive to students.
Really interesting
to increase our program so that students will want to be there.
Would the program be able to be a reciprocal program in which a student in North Carolina who wants to come to the university?
That would be an interesting.
Because I would like to see it that way.
That would be very creative.
See where students would more than likely opt to leave the territory, and so then when they're leaving the territory, while we're paying for these students to be somewhere else, then our population at the university goes down.
Well, you know what's really interesting, because I'm a parent. I have 3 sons that are in college now. I want my sons to have choices in terms of where they go. And it's a painful thing as a parent to tell your child that they can't go somewhere because you can't pay for it. And that's something. I have a son who's at UVI because they have a great program for what he's doing. He's a pre-med student, and it's a great program and allows him. They have a great engineering program. We'll still get students. We have one of the best marine biology programs. It'll also force us in other areas to necessarily step up to be even better. But allowing us not to have choices just to say, oh, we want to insulate ourselves, that's a terrible thing.
I don't think it's an insular argument. What I believe it's somehow the same argument that the Republicans used about charter schools. And I think it becomes all about choices. No, I think it's not about choices. It's about saying that what we have here isn't better, and you're not willing to invest the currency to make it better.
Well, one of the reasons we're not investing is that we're not utilizing our land grant status as well either. And that's another area that we need to, in terms of federal government, we need to be bringing more money in. We're not working cooperatively with the agriculture and with those areas, with our maritime and the other areas at the university that we're supposed to be working with. And I think that that's another thing. One of the things I wanted to point out that you guys were talking about, you were talking about the national campaign. And one of the things I think that would be a really amazing thing for the delegate's office to do is that really that is the only voice of the Caribbean in Congress right now. That person who sits there really speaks for the entire Caribbean basin. And there are pockets of Virgin Islanders in other areas of the United States, in Atlanta, in Maryland, in New York. The 2010 census in New York said that 70,000 people self-identified themselves as Virgin Islanders. And so if we were to then galvanize those groups to no longer just be social activity groups, but to also be political action groups, then the delegate's office could do things like say, listen, we have legislation that's going to affect the Virgin Islands, that's going to affect the Caribbean. I need the Freshwater Yankees in New York. I need the Virgin Islands Association in Maryland to bring pressure on those members of Congress that are in those districts to then assign to come on and co-sponsor with us specific legislation that is related to the Caribbean. Because Congress right now, the federal government is going to be looking at the Virgin Islands, and we need to keep the focus on us because they're going to be concerned. 2014, Panama Canal is going to reopen. Cuba is going to reopen up. China is everywhere in the Caribbean right now. Venezuela is also moving in. We become the last stand for the United States in the Caribbean, aside from Puerto Rico. And we are not utilizing that to the best way we can in Congress.
That's a good point, but why should people choose you over the delegate?
Well, one of the things I have to say is that people are very frustrated about the way the economy is. I mean, we have our crime rate for our juvenile violent crimes is astronomical, just out of the roof in terms of other jurisdictions, in terms of the national average. We're also really facing a lot of other problems. And people keep looking just at the local government at that and saying we want change because we're not happy with it. What I'm saying to people is that if we continue with the same person in the same way, doing the same things in Washington also, we're going to get the same results, which haven't been to the best of benefit of the Virgin Islands. We need change. We need change at all levels to effectuate what we want here in the Virgin Islands.
I want to get some quick short answers because before we run out of time. And so there are like two quick things. One, the Constitutional Convention. You know, that's a huge issue right now. And our Senate President, in my view, is attempting to hijack that process.
Well, you know, I was on a radio show with him and I told him I thought that he was wrong, that I thought that he should allow the process to continue where it is. He is not even being what I feel is a particularly, I'm not going to go there with that. But what I'm going to say is that I think that that's being used for political purposes and that there's a process that needs to be followed in terms of the Constitutional Convention and let it play itself out.
The other question has to do, we had our social media question of the day last night regarding the customs zone issue and us being outside of it. And I believe in 2017 we have to make a determination whether or not to stay where we are or put ourselves back in the customs zone. What will you do to ensure that our shipping companies and our businesses here won't be paying those astronomical prices because we're considered foreign outside the customs zone?
Right. We're the only territory that has to deal with these customs duty issues. None of the other territories deal with it, and it is really stifling our small manufacturers. They have to pay a customs duty on raw material coming in, and if there are customs going back out to the United States, they pay customs duties there. They have to go through a convoluted process to be able to be exempted from that, the 3D note. And that's unacceptable. And it's really driving the cost, not just for our manufacturers, but also to then eventually to the consumer. And I think that's something that needs to be eliminated.
Ms. Plaskett, I just want to thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Tonight. I think I really enjoyed you having here. From what I gathered over the last 2 nights that we've been here, what I have gathered is that there needs to be a debate.
Thank you.
I would love to see a debate between both yourself and the delegate.
Well, I've sent her a letter requesting a debate, asking her for a debate, and we shall see.
And I think the people would want to see that, to get a full picture of both of you before they make a decision. I would love to see that, and I've enjoyed both nights we've been here, both with you and the delegate.
Thank you all. You've been very gracious hostess.
Best of luck.
And thank you all as well.
Thank you. All right, we will be back in a moment with our social media question of the day.
Thanks.
And we are back here with Stacey Plaskett, who is an aspirant for the Delegate to Congress seat for 2012. And we have, at the end of our show, we usually do a social media question of the day. And our social media question of the day today is, do you support the current CFO bill as it has passed the House? If you do, tell us why. If you do not, what changes, if any, would you make to that CFO bill?
Well, I do not support the CFO bill that is in the House, that passed the House, for several reasons. One, I don't believe it's a CFO bill. The first thing is that this bill is in no way, shape, or form the bill that was originally started by the delegate many years ago, nor is it a bill that's similar to the CFO bill that was passed in the District of Columbia in the 1990s when they instituted a CFO. This individual is paid for by the people of the Virgin Islands. There is no budgetary or responsibility that's taken on to by the federal government to the Virgin Islands, like was done in the District of Columbia. They're not taking over any of our bills, any of our budgetary shortfalls, our unfunded pension liability, which they did in terms of the District of Columbia. And the person is nominated by a commission that then goes to our governor, then goes to our local senators. And if the thing that people are concerned with is in terms of corruption and authenticity and having some financial accountability. That's not going to happen at this one. What I do believe is that we in the Virgin Islands need to be doing things internally before we move to such a thing as a CFO. We need to have an Attorney General who is an elected position. I'm very much for that.
Now, you know you're not going to get me with that. I will never support having an elected Attorney General.
Why?
In the
it's done in many states. It's done in other territories.
I don't think the system necessarily is the problem. I think who we put in that system is the problem. And so I know for me, that elected Attorney General is never going to work for me at all. But what I want to do...
But wait, there are two other things that I think we need to do internally. One, for each of our local senates, I have offered my services for free, pro bono. We need ethics laws. We have no ethics laws on the books. The other thing that we do not have is we have not given our own Inspector General sufficient staffing or funding to do the job that he's supposed to do.
And now we know why the senators act the way they act on the floor that we talked earlier.
Well, Attorney Plaskett, we thank you for coming on VI Voices, and there you have your answer to your social media question of the day.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing, hopefully, a debate between the two of you. I think it's very interesting.
And I just want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank your viewers as well for allowing me the opportunity to present myself and my platform and my issues, and to be a potential candidate. And I'm asking for your support and your votes September 8th in the primary elections.
And your website is?
And the website is Plaskett for Congress, www.plaskettforcongress.org, or www.forpeoplenotpolitics.org.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been another wonderful evening episode of VI Voices. I think it's been quite informative and enlightening tonight, as it was last night as well. But, you know, as you know, from what you can gather so far from these last two episodes, is that this is a crucial election, and we have got to be involved in this election. So remember,
your
voice
can make a difference.
Good night, everybody.